They poured wine on him. They laughed. They clapped. And then the truth came out. The man they humiliated wasn't poor. He wasn't powerless. He wasn't invisible. He was Alexander Crowell, a billionaire investor, a silent owner of companies they depended on, and the man who quietly controlled their future. Part 1 ended with shock frozen across the room. Wine dripping from his jacket. Smiles dying mid-laugh. This is part 2. The ballroom was silent now. Moments earlier, the air had been filled with music, laughter, and expensive confidence. Now it felt heavy, like everyone was afraid to breathe. Ethan Whitmore, the young man who poured the wine, stood frozen. His hand still gripped the empty glass. His face was pale. His confidence had vanished. His mother tried to speak, but no words came out. His father forced an awkward laugh, hoping it would break the tension. Alexander calmly removed his soaked jacket. No anger. No shouting. No rush. He handed the jacket to a waiter and said quietly, "You may go." Then he turned to Ethan. "Do you know why I didn't stop you?" Alexander asked. Ethan swallowed hard. I don't. Because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought no one important was watching." Those words hit harder than the wine ever could. Alexander snapped his fingers once. Immediately, the head of security stepped forward, not toward Alexander but toward Ethan and his parents. "Sir," the guard said firmly, "we'll need you to remain here." Ethan's father frowned. "Remain here? This is a private event." Alexander gave a small smile. It was. He turned to the guests still standing in shock. "Ladies and gentlemen, this event is over. My team will contact you shortly regarding next steps." Phones were already out. People were recording. Whispering spread across the room like fire. One by one, guests were escorted out calmly but firmly. Soon only one family remained. Alexander sat down casually, like a man settling into his own living room. He pulled out his phone. "David," he said, "terminate the Whitmore merger. Effective immediately." Ethan's father rushed forward. "Wait. Alexander, this is a misunderstanding." Alexander raised one finger. "You were scheduled to close a $650 million deal on Monday." He paused. "That deal no longer exists." The man's legs trembled. Alexander continued, calm and precise. "Freeze their offshore accounts. Flag the tax irregularities we discussed. And notify the board that I'll be stepping in as interim chair." The call ended. The silence was unbearable. Ethan's mother whispered, "You can't do this." Alexander finally looked at her. "You raised a man who poured wine on a stranger for entertainment." He paused. "I'm simply pouring truth on your legacy." Ethan snapped. "You tricked us. You set this up." Alexander stood slowly. "No," he said. "I showed up as myself without my money speaking for me." He stepped closer. "You didn't need proof that I was poor to treat me like nothing. You just assumed." He turned toward the camera still recording. "Remember this moment. Not because I'm rich." He pointed at Ethan. "But because this is who people become when they think power protects them." Before anyone could respond, 2 police officers walked in. "Not security. Police." "Mr. Whitmore," one officer said, "we have a warrant regarding fraud, insider trading, and tax evasion." Ethan's father stared at Alexander in disbelief. "You knew?" Alexander nodded. "I didn't come undercover to be insulted," he said quietly. "I came to decide who deserved mercy." Handcuffs clicked. Cameras flashed. Ethan shouted, "This isn't fair." Alexander replied calmly, "Neither was what you did when you thought I didn't matter." As the parents were led away, Ethan collapsed into a chair. Alexander didn't leave. Instead, he sat across from him. "You're not your parents," Alexander said. "You destroyed my life," Ethan replied, his voice breaking. "No," Alexander said. "I stopped the lie that was holding it together." He slid a card across the table. "You have 2 choices." Ethan stared at the card. "Option 1, Alexander continued, you fight me. You lose everything. Slowly." He paused. "Option 2, you disappear. You start over without my money, my name, or your parents' shadow." Ethan whispered, "Why give me a choice?" Alexander stood. "Because someone once gave me one," he said, "when I didn't deserve it." As Alexander walked toward the exit, a woman's voice stopped him. "Why wine?" Alexander paused. "When I was 17, he said, people like this poured beer on my mother while she cleaned their offices." The room was silent. "I promised myself that if I ever had power," he continued, "I wouldn't use it to scream." He turned back. "I'd use it to end cycles. And then he walked out. 1 week later, headlines exploded. Billionaire exposes elite family at charity gala. Whitmore empire collapses overnight. Undercover investor sparks corporate reckoning. Companies fell. Boards resigned. Lawsuits piled up. But Alexander never held a press conference. Instead, he quietly funded scholarships for service workers' children, legal aid for employees hurt by corruption, and a foundation in his mother's name. Months later, Alexander walked into a small cafe. "What can I get you?" the barista asked. Alexander looked up. It was Ethan. No designer suit. No arrogance. Just humility. "I'm sorry," Ethan said quietly. Alexander nodded. That was enough. As Alexander walked out, someone whispered, "Do you know who that is?" The barista shrugged. "No. Just seems like a decent guy." Alexander smiled. Because sometimes the real test of character isn't who you respect. It's who you think you can disrespect. You never know when the nobody is actually watching.